Joy is something to be embraced, most especially when we're having difficult times, because it actually has the power to change our situation. Fear doesn't change it, despair doesn't change it, depression doesn't change it, but joy has that power. As the Baal Shem Tov famously said, the Baal Shem Tov was a very famous rabbi, by the way, if you aren't familiar with that name. What he said is this: if tears open up the gates of heaven, joy demolishes them. So in the mystical Jewish tradition, there is this idea that when our hearts break, we release such power that the gates of heaven open. And that's what he's referring to in that first part. And then he says, joy demolishes them. So no more gates, right? It can never close again. Literally, joy is a catalyst for transformation, for mental and physical and spiritual transformation. And there's a fair bit of research out there, medical and psychological research, to support the fact that that does bring change in our lives. So I'm sure we're all thrilled to know the research finally caught up with the scripture on that one. What brings joy? Because, the first thing that I would be asking at this point is, so how do I sidle up next to joy and get this thing going? And what people have found is that it's a handful of practices, most of which should be familiar to you. A practice of gratitude, of being thankful for all of the large and small things in our lives. Performing acts of kindness. Engaging in play. Allowing ourselves to laugh and be curious about the things around us. And focusing on deep connection with those we love, our friends and our family. I want to tell you a story. It comes from the Jewish tradition, and it's well known in that tradition, so much so that perhaps you will have heard it, but this is one that I think bears repeating. A man had a dream one night, and his former rabbi, who was deceased, came to him in his dream and said to him, "It has been decreed in heaven that in the coming year your son will die." Needless to say, this was horribly upsetting to the man, and he decided to go into the next town where there was a fairly famous rabbi and tell the rabbi about this dream because it was so concerning. And he went to the rabbi, and the rabbi heard his words. And instead of reassuring him, which I'm sure is what he was hoping, the rabbi sighed and remained silent. A reaction that probably didn't bode well for the man's son and sent him into real despair and grief at what would be coming. Now, when he went to see this rabbi, it was the time of a celebration called Simchat Torah. In the Jewish tradition, they read through the whole Torah in a year, just like we do with our liturgical year when we use lectionaries. And they come to the end of that cycle, and what they do is take out the Torah scrolls, and they sing and dance with them. So it is a time of really immense joy. The man decided to stay for that ceremony, and when it came time for him to leave, he went back to his rabbi, and he said to his rabbi, "Will you give me a blessing?" And the rabbi happily assured him that his family would be well. And then he asked, "What special deed did you do on Simchat Torah?" And the man recounted how he was standing there leaning against a wall, not at all engaged in all of the joy that was going on. In fact, he was crying. And then he remembered this, that God commands us to joy, that it was his duty to sing and dance with the Torah scroll. And so he washed his face and joined the dancing, ignoring that terrible feeling of dread. That feeling of dread didn't go away, but he did make a little space for joy. And the rabbi said this to him, "You should know this is what caused the change in your situation." The power in rejoicing even when we are not in the best space, when we're having rather negative feelings, is powerful, and making that space gives us a chance for transformation. What it does is give us the ability to invite joy into our lives. While we still feel those feelings, I'm not talking about repressing feelings or anything like that, but if we can make that little bit of space, joy can enter, and that's the transformative power.